Hello, real estate people. This is Matt Cockrum, and today we are going to look at the Purchaser's Representation Agreement, otherwise known a lot of times as a buyer agency agreement. As a hard and fast rule in real estate, as you proceed through your transaction, everything that you do needs to be in writing. And that starts with your agreement between your brokerage and your real estate agent and you. There needs to be an agreement in place that you are committing to work with them and they are committing to work and focus on working with you. And so today we're going to look at that paperwork package and get a real clear idea of exactly what it says, exactly what each of the paragraphs means, and how it protects you as you move through the transaction. So without further ado, let me pull up my screen here and we will look at just that buyer agency agreement. So what I have done here is I have an entire package of information you would get from us if we were deciding to work together. The first 5 pages is the actual buyer agency agreement, the buyer representation agreement. And then beyond that, there's kind of like a glossary. It's called useful terms in real estate. And then this page here is a RESPA agreement. You're going to see this whether you're working with RE/MAX 100 or likely any other brokerage. Our owner owns a title company and a mortgage company, and he makes profits off all of the companies, and we're required to disclose that to you. And then last but not least, there is a lead-based paint brochure. We will talk about that when we get to it. All right, so let me zoom in here just a little bit so that we can get a clearer picture of the screen, and we'll go from there. All right, let's get started. Very top part, super straightforward. Date the agreement's made on, this is you, and this is the brokerage that you are working with. Sometimes the agents will put their name in there as well, not required, but also not a big deal if it's there. It's nice to have as much information as possible. I'd rather have more information than less information. Number 1 really states the point of the entire agreement, which is you appointing that broker to work on your behalf to procure a piece of real estate, whether it's land, primary residential residence, whether it's investment property, whatever the case may be, and we're going to describe that a little bit further down in the paperwork. Paragraph 2 states that you have not entered into a similar agreement with another real estate brokerage that hasn't expired. Now, you might have done it in the past, and it's either been dissolved or expired, then you are permitted to enter into this agreement. But the buyer agent is going to commit time, energy, effort, and money into getting you the house that you want or the property that you want, and so you are committing to them to work with them. The way real estate works is the agents and the brokerages don't get paid for the most part until you go to settlement, and so when they're putting all that time in, they just need an assurance that you are committed to working with them as much as they are committed to working with you. Paragraph number 3, again, pretty straightforward. One thing I will note here that it just reminds us that everything shall be in writing. This is your address and this is the real estate company's address. Paragraph 4 talks about terms and termination of the agreement, or term and termination of the agreement. So as a general rule for a buyer agency agreement, 6 months is not unusual. Sometimes we see 12, 18, or even 24 months if it's a specific property or a type of property that you're looking for and it's going to be a long-term search. But for the most part, 6 months is pretty average, I would say, for us. I will tell you there is no such thing as average, and so that is a negotiable item. And so if that's something that you want to discuss, certainly feel free to reach out and we will be happy to do that. Or feel free to reach out to your real estate agent if you've stumbled across this video and you're not considering working with RE/MAX 100. We are not trying to entice the clients of other brokerages. We're trying to be as useful as possible in the marketplace. The last paragraph here talks about early termination fee. And so this I really would consider kind of an anti-shenanigans sentence that's in the paragraph. If you have a life circumstance that changed, something goes different in your life and you're not going to buy a house anymore, as a general rule, RE/MAX 100 is not going to enforce this particular clause or part of the contract. However, there have been times when a buyer and a seller have gone off on the side and elected to kind of try to push the real estate agents out. And this is a protection against that. So as long as you're behaving honestly and the real estate agent is acting and behaving honestly and everybody's moving forward toward the goal, this will never even come into play. It is, like I said, an anti-shenanigans sentence more than anything else. We don't want any funny business. Paragraph 5 talks about the broker's duties to you. One of the big things I think that I really key in on is that they are responsible for holding your information confidentially. Everything you need to tell them, they will hold in the strictest confidence, at least we will. And you need to be able to trust your buyer's agent. So you need to know that they are going to hold your information and maintain confidentiality for you throughout the entire transaction. And so that's important for you to know. That's an important commitment, and you need to trust the person that you're working with. 6 talks about your duties to the real estate agent. Work exclusively with the broker, and we already talked a little bit about that, but the only way that the real estate agents get paid is at settlement. We put in a lot of time, energy, and effort on the front end, and we get paid at settlement. We don't get paid before that. And so we're going to commit everything we've got to getting you a property, and we need you to commit to working with us. The rest you can look through, very easy. This is something that I do want to highlight to you just as you go through your search. It's not a giant part of this agreement, but it's something good for you to know as you move through the transaction. Is you're acknowledging here that the seller might have video and audio equipment in the house. They're supposed to disclose it. They don't always, I'm sure. I have heard of cases where the sellers were literally watching and listening to conversations about the house on their iPad while people were in there. Ring doorbells are a big deal these days, so just be aware of that. And as you're having conversations, as you're touring the houses, you want to have your meat and potatoes conversations out in the driveway or away from the property, not in the property. Paragraph 7 talks about the purpose of this form. So what are we wanting to look for you? Is it a primary residential residence? Is it an investment property? Is it a piece of land that you want to build on? What are we looking for? It can be very broad, but we just described that there. Paragraph 8A, retainer fee. Every once in a while we do collect a retainer fee ahead of time if there is a specific need for it, or the logistics of the potential transaction require advanced monies. For the most part, we don't collect a retainer fee. And then here in 8B, this does spell out the compensation that the buyer will pay to the brokerage and to the agent. And you can see here, RE/MAX is 3% of the sales price plus $395 flat fee or admin fee. And then let's see here, in most cases, seller pays broker's fee. So the way that the sellers have arranged with the agent that's representing them is they're offering out a cooperative commission or a co-op agent commission for that person to bring a buyer through the house. And so I'm going to pull up, this is just a random listing that I pulled up, and you'll start seeing these as you go through your search. But here is the compensation. This is buyer agency compensation, 3% of gross. So in this case, you would only owe $395 flat fee. Pretty straightforward. In the cases where the seller is not offering a fee, most times that's like a for sale by owner property, just have a conversation with your buyer's agent. Most of them are very savvy, and we have done it many, many times where we have negotiated with that seller to pay these fees, and they're tickled to do it because they're saving money on the listing side and they're only having to pay the buyer agency fee. So oftentimes, even if it's not offered up front, it can be negotiated, but does need to be discussed as soon as you are made aware of it. Paragraph 8B, number 1, this is another anti-shenanigans paragraph. If you are introduced to a property by your buyer's agent and you then try to go purchase it after the expiration or something like that, this just puts a little window on any properties that your buyer agent or that we introduce you to. Again, if you're behaving on the up and up, this doesn't even come into play. 9, you will know if you're in a relocation program, and we will put your information in there. That's mostly corporate relocations. Number 10, types of real estate representation. So let's talk a little bit about this. Generally, what's going to happen is there's going to be a company working with the seller to represent them, and then there's going to be a company, us, working with you as the buyer to represent you. Very straightforward, easy to understand. Separate companies representing separate parties. However, there are other possibilities within the marketplace, and so let's talk a little bit about those and what this paperwork references with respect to those. There is a possibility that you would identify a property that's listed by RE/MAX 100. So from the state's eyes, RE/MAX 100 is representing the seller and RE/MAX 100 is representing the buyer. And in this case, the state goes, well, the same company is representing both parties. What we'll allow you to do is the broker, the managing broker of that office, will designate the seller's agent to work with the seller and designate the buyer's agent to work with the buyer. Files are maintained separately, and that's called designated representation. Both parties get full representation, and you do have to acknowledge that you understand the brokerage is representing both sides, but in that case, you do get complete representation. It's a very fair, in my estimation, way to proceed with a real estate transaction. So in this case, the way I fill this paperwork out is I say the buyer does consent to designated representation. The truth is, you're going to have another form to sign if this comes up, but this is just sort of a preliminary discussion on it. And we need to know about this stuff. Dual representation, on the other hand, is not my favorite thing. That would be if I've signed up to represent you as your buyer agent, and I have a listing where I've signed up to represent and care for the seller. I've agreed to duties for each of those parties, and the fact that I will have confidential information about either party that I normally would share if I had it to provide a negotiating advantage one way or the other, I'm not allowed to share. It dramatically waters down the representation you get as a buyer in a dual agency situation. So in all the paperwork you'll see from me, you will see that I say you do not select or consent to dual representation. That doesn't mean if a unique circumstance comes up, you can't eventually later consent to it. But as a general rule, these are the rules. This is the set of rules we're going to play by. So if you have other questions about that, please do ask. But that is how we fill this section out. And it says right here, an additional disclosures required. Number 11 is easy. Compliance with fair housing laws. We're not going to discriminate against anyone. Paragraph 12 talks about attorney's fees. If for some reason one, either the brokerage or you, this party breaches this agreement, then one party can sue the other party, and whoever is found to be in violation could be responsible for legal fees and some other things that go on here. We want to avoid that at all costs, and oftentimes a discussion goes a long way. Paragraph 13, if you have a real estate license, sometimes people come from out of state and they have a license in another state, but not in Virginia. We would note that here because we need to actually disclose it in the sales contract, so we need to know that. Disclaimer, paragraph 14, professional services, you acknowledge that you've hired us as real estate experts. We are not attorneys, tax advisors, lenders, appraisers, surveyors, on and on and on. If we need specialized knowledge or information, we are going to hire the right person to give us that. Your real estate agent is very good at real estate, has a basic information of many of these things, but does not have a, what's the word I'm sort of looking for, a expertise in this that we would need to properly evaluate a circumstance. So we're going to call in the right professionals. Megan's Law is the sex offenders law. There is a register that you can go to. If you cancel out of that, there's, gosh, I don't want to go there right now. I just wanted to highlight it. Right there, you can go there and check to see if there's sex offenders, registered sex offenders around any property you are considering. Wire fraud, we need to just quickly talk about that. Very important that you're careful about how you push your money around. The two places you're probably going to do that is with the earnest money deposit and with your deposit for settlement. And just be sure that you are triple, quadruple checking the wiring instructions that you are receiving from either us as the real estate company or from the title company. Never respond to an email that just says, hey, oh, by the way, we changed our wiring instructions. We've had stories where people have lost hundreds of thousands of dollars that way. So just be aware of that. Double and triple check before you send your wires in. If we provide referrals to different service providers, we are providing that as a service, but not necessarily as a blessing or a warranty or guarantee on their services. There are addenda that we might put into place with respect to this agreement. 16 other provisions. If there's something special about your transaction in particular, we can put that in there as well on 16. And we're going to initial all the way through, sign, date, and that would encompass, or that would finish up the buyer agency agreement. The rest we're not going to go into a tremendous amount of detail on. The useful information is 4 pages. It's basically definitions about the transaction. It's nice to know, so it's good to go over and have an idea about. We talked about the RESPA agreement, which is, keep going, Matt. Here, and this just discloses that our owner owns other real estate related service companies and makes money from those. And then I did say we were going to talk a little bit about this. Any house built prior to 1978 may have lead-based paint on the walls. That's when they sort of started shutting it down right around then. And so if you buy a house that was prior to 1978, there's a form you're going to have to sign. We as the real estate agents are going to have to confirm or sign off that we provided a lead-based paint instructional brochure to you from the EPA. That is this brochure. It's 20 pages. And so what we do as a policy is just provide it to everybody on the front end. Even if you're looking for a new home, even if you're looking for a newer home, And that way we can just confidently sign off when that form comes up. If anything changes, if you find something, you find a charming older house that's well upgraded, whatever the case may be, you've already got the lead-based paint brochure. And so that wraps up our review of the buyer agency agreement and its associated paperwork. Remember, everything in real estate as you go through your transaction needs to be in writing. That starts with your buyer's agency and your buyer brokerage agreement and getting that in writing in place. And then as you move forward with the sales contract and on to settlement, get everything in writing. Even if it's just an email, do not rely on verbal representations. And that starts now at the beginning of the transaction with your buyer's agent. I sure hope that you found this video useful. And if you did, please like the video. Comment below if you've got a question that you'd like me to answer in a future video. Share this with someone you think would find it useful. And subscribe to the channel. We put out tons of useful real estate information. And finally, if you are considering purchasing a home in Northern Virginia, we would love the opportunity to show you how we can care for you, serve you, and help you reach your real estate goal. If you stumbled across this and you are outside of the Northern Virginia area, but you would like us to help connect you with an excellent real estate agent in your area that will take super care of you, please reach out and we'll be happy to help you do that.